I want to say good morning to everybody that's joining us from the Facebook stream as well. If you don't know this already, our morning and evening services are available on Facebook. So if you travel this summer, you can always still join us on Sundays for our evening and morning services. Same time, join us live on Facebook. So just want to say hey to everybody that joins us from there, because we actually have a lot of people that watch from all over the country. So it's kind of cool how that little thing has grown. As I get started this morning, by show of hands, anybody ever done something that they felt guilty for or felt any sort of shame about? Just show of hands. Okay, good. I'm really glad I'm not the only one who just raised my hand there. Open up to Matthew 26. I noticed something I'd never noticed before through a Facebook post recently about the Lord's Supper. And it's really simple. It's really right there. If you read through it, you probably would find the same conclusion, but I just never thought about it this way. But open up to Matthew 26. I want to read a little bit. Starting in verse 14. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priest and asked, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. And from then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. So Judas is going to betray Jesus. We know this. This is before the Lord's Supper. So they figure out where they're going to do the Lord's Supper. And then in verse 20, okay. When evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12. And while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." They were very sad, and they began to say to him, one after the other, "Surely you don't mean me, Lord." And Jesus replied, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had never been born." Then Judas, the one who would betray him, said, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi." And Jesus answered, "You have said so." While they were eating, Jesus took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat, this is my body." And then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. So what happens to Judas? I'm sure you may already know, but if you don't, we're going to look at it. Just flip over to the next chapter. 27, verse 1. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people made their plans how to have Jesus executed. So they bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate the governor. And when Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. "I have sinned," he said, "for I have betrayed innocent blood." "What is that to us?" they replied. "That's your responsibility." So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. Judas saw death as the only answer to his shame and to his guilt. But what's interesting that I hadn't really thought about before, hadn't really put together in my mind, was that night, sitting around the table, Judas is not the only betrayer. In fact, if you go just beyond the Lord's Supper in Matthew 26, Jesus predicts a second person to betray him, Peter. Now, you may recognize the name Peter. Jesus once said, "You're the rock on which I will build my church." So hearing betrayal and rock of the church sounds kind of funny together. But he surely does. In the courtyard, he betrays Jesus 3 times. And in fact, imagine this, he swore up and down that he didn't know who Jesus was. Let that sink in. Peter, the rock, swearing he didn't know who Jesus was. But what happens to Peter? We'll find out the end of his story. You'd have to go over to John chapter 21. Just listen to this. They're sad. This is after Jesus is crucified. And so what do? What any good old fisherman boy does. They get in the boat and they go out fishing all night. And they don't have much luck. The disciples decided to go fishing. So early in the morning, this is verse 4. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples didn't realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some." And when they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him and jumped into the water. See, Peter cannot wait to get back to Jesus. He's not hauling that fish in, right? He jumps into the water and swims back to Jesus. And they eat some breakfast, and then Jesus finally addresses Peter. Verse 15. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And he answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, "Do you love me?" And he said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." Why is Peter hurt? Well, when you betray the Son of Man 3 times, and then he has to ask you 3 times, "Do you love me?" Suddenly it clicks. Oh yeah, I betrayed you. Jesus is trying to just make doubly sure. Do you really love me? Right? Do you really love me? Judas and Peter both invited to the Lord's Supper. They both ate. Jesus washed both of their feet. And they both betrayed him. The difference is Judas didn't come back to Jesus. He didn't run home. He saw death as the only answer for his shame and his guilt. While Peter turned and swam. He jumped out of the boat. He could not wait to be back with Jesus. And I think it's the same for us. So we have a choice to make when we deal with guilt and shame. What are we going to do? Are we going to run to Jesus, or are we just going to let it crush us? But what's so beautiful about Jesus and what's so beautiful about grace is that this supper that we're about to partake in, it doesn't matter. Grace gets offered whether you're clean or not, whether you've betrayed him or not, whether you're perfect or not. He says, "This is my body. This is my blood. Take it and eat and remember me."